Off the coast of Florida, in the Gulf of Mexico, is a remote barrier island steeped in history. From turpentine harvesting to a practice range for B-24 bombers, Little St. George Island stands proud in the Apalachicola Bay. Welcome to Green Ridge Outdoor Adventures. The Apalachicola Bay is world-renowned for their oysters and seafood. This is because of the water released from the Chattahoochee and Flint River in Georgia and Alabama. This water is held up by Woodruff Dam in Lake Seminole and eventually becomes the Apalachicola River at the Georgia-Florida border. Several islands help form the Apalachicola Bay, and in this video, we are camping on one of them called Little St. George Island. Since we had about a 5-hour drive, we left Noonan at 6 a.m. on Thursday morning. But unfortunately, an hour and a half into our ride, we hit heavy traffic just outside of Fort Benning. We sat in traffic for 2 hours, but we tried not to let it affect our excitement of getting to Florida. In researching this trip, we realized that the west half of St. George Island was private. So it looked like we were in for about an 8-mile paddle to Little St. George from St. George Island. But we were very lucky to find a generous resident of the private west side that was nice enough to allow us to park at their house and use their dock. And this cut our paddle in half. More than 8 hours later, on what we thought would be a 5.5-hour drive, we arrived at the Plantation gate entrance. And we were asked not to reveal the name of the resident or their home or our secret launch location.
Hello. What was the name of it? We're gas.
Sure. Bird watcher?
That no.
What? No. Yes, that's it.
We both know it.
What's one of y'all's name?
Joshua.
That's right here. All right, y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are in. Once we arrived at our secret launch location, we quickly packed the kayaks and were on the water by 3. As we made our way out to the bay from our secret launch location, we picked a landmark that would help us find it when we returned.
We're there, right? Yeah, this is it.
Once we get on the water, we find ourselves having a love-hate relationship with our upcoming paddle. The water conditions, an incoming or outgoing tide, the wind, and the sun can all make your life miserable. But on the other hand, if the conditions are not horrible, a long paddle can be just the escape you need. The long paddle can help you think deeply about things going on in your life, or simply just give you a chance to clear your mind and focus on the next paddle going into the water. Between St. George and Little St. George Islands is the cut, the Bob Sykes cut to be exact. Before this trip, we were warned that paddling near the cut could be dangerous, but we found it to be quite easy. The cut did create larger swells, but it was nothing that we couldn't handle. So from our secret launch location to the east end of Little St. George, it was about a 4-mile paddle and took us about 2 hours. The east end of Little St. George has 2 primitive campsites, but we only saw 1 fire ring. So we just made it to Sike's Cut, campsites 1 and 2, and just checking out the campsite. This is number 2 here. Looks like there's a Big fire pit, bench. Not many trees for hammocks. And not even sure there was a site one because we didn't see a fire pit or a bench. What'd you think about that paddle?
It's alright.
Wasn't too bad.
Quite nice, actually.
Yeah. So we had a southern wind, so that was blowing north, so it was kind of a headwind, but wasn't too bad. While camping reservations aren't needed on Little St. George, they are recommended through the Apalachicola Estuarine National Research Reserve. We only spent about 15 minutes checking out these sites and decided to go farther west to the primitive campsites in the center of Little St. George at the government dock. Since the wind was coming from the south, we paddled west and the island blocked the wind for much of the paddle. That is until we got to the larger inlets. That allowed the wind to blow up and over the island and back to the surface of the water, which had a bigger effect on us as we paddled. The paddle from Sike's Cut and their campsites to the government dock campsites was another 5 miles and took us over 2.5 hours. One campsite at Government Dock is right on the water, next to the information kiosk. And another 100 yards down the trail was Government Dock campsite number 2. Due to our delay earlier that day, we quickly unpacked the kayaks and Josh got a fire going. Earlier that week, I made some foil packet meals for our first night with shrimp, sausage, and veggies, and Josh got them on the fire, and it was a great way to end the night.
Burn in my mouth.